The voice of sharing. Durian ASEAN.
ASEAN Dailies. First and the foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Good morning, this is Arlene.
Good morning, this is Gowri.
And you are with us on our very beautiful Thursday morning, bringing you news from Southeast Asia on our Monday morning. On our Thursday morning. Today we are going to bring you on the political side first of Southeast Asia. Human rights could slip further in 2016. If you thought 2015 was bad, well, wait until you see what's going to be happening soon in 2016.
And this is also based on a lot of experts' perspectives, a lot of analysis that they have been doing. And according to one of them here, who is the National Human Rights Commissioner, Angkana Nila Pajit, she said that, personally speaking, I am not sure if things will improve. I think there will be an increasing retaliation from ordinary citizens. And she was explaining that more people are likely to exercise their political rights as the military regime continues to stay in power. And we're talking about Thailand here, how things are just getting tighter and more restricting, especially in terms of freedom of expression, where people just cannot voice out anymore. But she actually sees that people will try to push past that boundary.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, a lot of things are happening right now in Thailand that is definitely against human rights. For example, suspicious death under military detention of two high-profile prisoners and the loosely interpreted use of the draconian lèse majesté. I think everyone is quite familiar with that particular law, which bode ill for the next 12 months under the National Council for Peace and Order, the formal name of the military regime.
Right, that's right. And she also said that I expect more human rights violations in 2016. The junta will feel less secure, and those who used to support the NCPO will increasingly become uncertain. And this was said in reference to the economic stagnation as well as corruption allegations that has been recently directed against the key junta members.
Well, further explanation on the lèse majesté law, which has been so broadly interpreted that it was used last December to, you know what, prosecute a man for making alleged sarcastic remark against Kun Tong Deng, a royal dog. I mean, it's a dog,
right,
of His Majesty of the King. And according to Mahidol University, there's a conflict resolution. He's a conflict resolution expert, Gautam Arya. He said that he expects to see more propaganda by the military junta to feed through various media in 2016. Seems like the military junta is using the royalty to make themselves look good.
That's right. I mean, even the news about the dog, how this man got actually prosecuted because he insulted a dog, that really riled up social media, especially Twitter at that time when it came out. And it shows how loosely they're using the laws, especially when it comes to saying anything against the junta or even against the king, especially, and it's just all doom for you.
But I guess being an animal in Thailand is a good thing.
It's a privilege, I guess, especially if you're a royal dog. You get privileges that certain human beings are not even entitled to.
Yeah.
And I think this one, Gotham also said that the issue of freedom of expression mostly concerns rural villagers' rights, especially the communities facing forced eviction from contested forest areas. And I think this is a very, very important point. I mean, if you're living in the city, you're well educated, you know what are the laws in place, for freedom of expression, how far I can go, what will put me in jail. But if you're in the rural area and you're poor, and you're not even aware about these things, and at the same time you're being deprived, you're being evicted from your homes.
In this case, forests.
Exactly, and they even have contested forest areas. So I think according to Gotham, it's the rural villages who are affected the most when it comes to the human rights
Definitely
issues.
a lot of human rights violation there. I mean, you saw a lot of death happening in the rural areas, especially when it comes to environmentalists, where they have fought for the rights of the rural villages. But at the end of the day, I mean, their lives is in jeopardy because of the human rights violation there. Talking about its neighbor, Cambodia, haunted by close call, Cambodia's long-ruling prime minister gears up for distant election. Means that it's not around the corner, right?
It's not around the corner.
He's already gearing it up. Wow.
Right. So Cambodia will not be holding any election, and at least not for another 2 years. But looking at Prime Minister Hun Sen, he's very long ruling, a mercurial strongman, you'd think that one should be imminent. And I think it's not a new news for us to come across, iron fist rulers who are finally toppled down or voted out of the government peacefully. But Hun Sen is one of the examples where he has been ruling for quite some time, and the only person who has ruled longer than him is Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe and a handful of other autocrats around the world.
Congratulations. Well, the thing is, the last election, Hun Sen party narrowly won the last election in 2013. So at the end of the day, I think he's just trying to secure his spot for the next election, because he know that the last election he just won, by a very small margin.
But what he's doing, which could be a good thing, is that he's actually trying to boost his popularity right now. He's trying to move away from that scary, powerful Hun Sen, and he's trying to be more friendly to the people.
Sounds like he learned something from the Thai military regime.
That's right.
I hope he penned a song called Happiness. I'm sure the Cambodians will love it.
He might, and he might even screen the next World Cup for free.
Oh, that would be amazing. Let's pack our bags to Cambodia.
And apart from that, he's also the not so good thing is he's still trying to blunt the opposition in the country to avert any sort of, they call it, the potential disaster. But of course, it would be advisable to have a healthy opposition in the country. And also recently, he gave salary bumps to civil servants and workers in the politically sensitive garment sector, and relaxed unpopular laws relating to motorbike licenses and inheritance tax.
That's a good thing. I mean, because he wanted to be popular, he actually solved some of the human rights issues happening in Cambodia, especially when it comes to the garment industry. A lot of them are being low paid and, work in very hazardous environment.
But he does have a long-time political foe by the name Sam Rainsy, and I don't think he's getting along too well with Sam, and analysts with Sam, yeah. Sound like I know Sam.
I know, right?
And the analysts also said that his Cambodian's People Party was rattled by November's historic election in Myanmar. And I think this is very interesting, because after what happened in Myanmar, he realized that you can be as dictatorial as you want, you can be as strict, as scary as you want, but at the end of the day, the power is in the hands of the people.
Completely true. At the end of the day, the people decide which prime minister that they want, but it seems like he has been winning election after election for decades. I'm not sure whether that's what Cambodian wants, or maybe that's what they want.
I'm still glad that the Myanmar election sort of gave him a wake-up call, that now he feels like, okay, I need to go and meet people and get to know them and be more popular among them, instead of just sitting in his office and being the scary guy that he is.
Yeah. But I don't know, maybe Sam is more popular. I mean, the name Sam itself is so approachable.
Well, we never know.
Anyway, talking about popularity, of course, we all know one of the most popular president in Southeast Asia is Jokowi. And he's right now is forced to stand, or at least is being advised by experts to stand against the KPK Law change.
And KPK is actually the Corruption Eradication Commission in Indonesia. And President Joko Widodo has been advised to oppose the House of Representatives' plan to revise this law on the Corruption Eradication Commission. And this is because after a thorough revision, it seems that there's been a lot of opposition from the public against this law. And the latest survey conducted by Saiful Mujni Research and Consulting showed that 61% of people are against this revision, which is feared would hamstring the anti-graft body.
Oh, that's interesting. 61%. There's a lot of people actually against this particular law. Corruption eradication has been a thorny issue for the Jokowi's administration. If you remember the beginning of his campaign, corruption is one of the area that he wants to tackle, heartily. And starting with a few last year between the Corruption Eradication Commission and the National Police, which ended with the dismissal of the two KPK commissioners. Looks like there's a lot of controversy happening with the KPK commissioners. So in this case, people are still very much, in a way, doubting.
That's right. I mean, when it comes to corruption, it's a very complex thing to handle. Even looking at Malaysia at the moment, we are also having a lot of problems trying to get our corruption commission to be independent from any sort of government interference. And I'm pretty sure that's what the Indonesians want as well.
It's very hard. I mean, especially it is part of the government body, or at least it's an agency part of working under the government. And then they are probably the only body that do checks and balances with the government or for the government.
Exactly.
Towards the government.
And you want to turn to them in cases of corruption cases, and you need to know that they will be impartial in the investigation. So ultimately, corruption can either be reduced, can be completely eradicated, ideally, but not so fast. I think what Jokowi can do now is slow down, don't push for the revise so fast, and consider what the people are also saying about his revision, and work accordingly.
And also perception is important, according to Burhanuddin, a political expert. He said that the selection of the new KPK, or Corruption Eradication Commissioner, is if Jokowi proceed for it, it will reinforce the public opinion that the current KPK is now defective. So perception is also important. It's not just about trying to make a decision here.
And I think the easiest thing is to remember that he is serving the people of Indonesia.
Yeah, the people of Indonesia. And for the people of Burma, new approach needed for genuine peace in Myanmar.
And everything seems to be looking good. Whenever we report anything about Myanmar now, I think you notice that there's a lot of terms like peace signing and ceasing of gunfire. But apparently that's not quite the case, as reported here by the Irrawaddy. Everything seems good on the surface. There's last year as well, they have 8 groups, 8 different rebel groups that signed a nationwide ceasefire agreement with the government. But there are also just as many groups that did not sign the ceasefire, which was not actually made public to the media.
That's interesting. And by strength of force of the 8 signatories, it's like 80% of the ethnic armed groups. On the reality on the ground, however, is entirely different. Almost the entire international and national media have swallowed the notion that 8 armed groups have signed the agreement, but a few had bothered to examine the list of those groups.
And that is important because the groups that did not sign are actually some of the most powerful rebel armies in the country. One of them, UWSA, actually has 20,000 strong members, followed by SSPP, KIA, also the Kachin Independence Organization, and the Taang National Liberation Army, a Palang group with at least 3,000 men in arms. And it seems like the so-called peace process in Burma's decades-long civil war has actually intensified since Thein Sein became the country's president in March 2011 back then. And in November 2012, he set up the MPC.
Oh, that's interesting. But that's the thing, like they cannot just overlook all these large military organization. I mean, they have been there for so long. I mean, fighting for their rights, for self-determination, or so for an autonomous state on its own. So I think it's important that the government provide a new approach in order for them to be able to have an independent but yet democratic state. But it's not easy. I mean, if you look at Indonesia's experience, when after they toppled Suharto, they also faced a similar ethnic conflict. But I think a lot of the lessons can be learned from its neighboring country, Indonesia, and other countries, post-independent nation. It's really not easy to navigate a country where they come from a sudden rise in a military regime to a democratic nation. A lot of awareness campaigns, a lot of peaceful negotiation needs to be done.
True, and I think it goes back to the mindset as well. I mean, of course, there will be some people who are in favor of the new government, but there would still be this whole lot of people who feel like this is what we are used to, and we should not really let go of this part of Burma.
Yeah, that's completely true. And if they decided to have their own state, it will not be good for them too, because to create a new state, you need to completely, create a constitution, a new economy, a new society, and this would also impact the community, the existing community who have been living there. So it's better that they do rounds and rounds of peaceful negotiation, try to gauge better with different parties in order for them to create a Myanmar that is stronger and has an identity of its own.
And ultimately, Myanmar cannot be using the same ceasefire approach anymore, and which is why the experts here are calling for a new approach, especially calling out to Aung San Suu Kyi to change the approach that Thein Sein has been using.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Anyway, we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll discuss on the economy and social culture side of Southeast Asia.
ASEAN Dailies. First and the foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Welcome back. This is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
And you're still with us on our Durian ASEAN Daily. And we are going to continue with the economic side of the news. Economies are seeing stronger growth for ASEAN despite the Chinese turmoil. That's a very good news.
It is. I would say it's a bit idealistic, but let's see what he says. Despite China's economic turmoil, ASEAN is likely to experience its best growth this year since 2012, especially when it grew by 5.9%, an economist said yesterday.
And this is very funny because the reason is that the fallout from China's slowdown will be offset by the recovery of major economies like the US. This is according to Mr. Manu Bhaskaran, founder of economic consultancy Centennial Asia. But, the thing is, another factor that is also impacting growth is the economic and political pressures, and it is fading in major ASEAN countries such as Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia. He added at the forum held by the ISIS Yusof Ishak Institute.
Right, and he's also said that the global economy, in terms of its demands for ASEAN exports, is going to turn out somewhat better than expected. And he also used the US as an example, saying that the gradual slow improvement in its labor market, as well as its housing, bank lending, and business consumer confidence, that's actually getting better. And these fragile recoveries in the Eurozone and Japan also are gradually gaining more strength, and that will in turn set to benefit ASEAN.
Well, I actually take this piece of news with a pinch of salt.
Right.
Partly because, if you look around us, I think a lot of people are feeling the negative mood of the economy and the politics, and they are still feeling that the country is going south instead of north. What we are seeing right now in Malaysia is a lot of people are complaining about the high cost of living, and globally the oil prices have steeply go down, that affected major Malaysia's revenue. In this case, we have to revise our budget 2016, and all this culminating with to add on top of that with Najib's political scandal. A lot of people are not really feeling that it's going to be positive.
I think so, especially in Malaysia. Definitely things are not quite looking up, and the support for our Prime Minister has also been somewhat waning of recent. But it seems like when we talk about Southeast Asia right now, we are sort of suffering the effect of what's happening in China at the moment. But at the same time, we do have a very strong, how do I say it, economic value as in terms of our trade exports. It's still ongoing, and there's still other countries that could help to balance out that impact from China.
I guess in this case, we just need to make the US as as one of our major trading partner. But unfortunately, if you look at major trading partners in Southeast Asia, the US are sometimes, majority of the time are not in the top 5 or even top 3 of the major trading partners. Like for example, in Malaysia, the major trading partners are usually dominated by China, EU, Japan, and many more other countries, and Singapore. So I think if we really want to recover, maybe we need to change our focus on the export market, and I think the TPPA might be able to provide that cushion.
Yeah, and I think according to Mr. Bhaskaran, he also said that we could maybe switch to look at Singapore, because Singapore does have a very booming electronic sector right now, especially, and although they are facing a few risks in terms of business competitiveness, but if we could switch to Singapore instead of China all the time, and that's one of the ways that we can actually manage the slowdown in the Chinese economy.
I guess we need to increase our tiger beer consumption. No, just kidding. But yeah, I think the government do need to revise on its economic plan for at least for 2016 and maybe 5 years down the line. Talking about human rights early on, I just want to add on about the Cambodian workers. Factory boss sees to empower his Cambodian worker. That's a very good thing.
It is, and this is being done by a Dutch owner of a factory in Cambodia, and he's trying to demonstrate to the government as well as to non-governmental organizations that socially responsible entrepreneurial enterprises doesn't always have to rely on the government. And he also said that the non-reliance on non-governmental organization is actually Southeast Asia's best path out of poverty. And these NGOs are trying hard to do good. They have a good heart, but he said the end effect is actually quite minimal.
I couldn't agree more. And what we are seeing right now is Cambodia is believed to have the second highest number of NGO per capita in the world. Wow, I didn't know about it until now. And it's only behind Rwanda. And we all know Rwanda had a really bad civil war back in the 90s. What we are seeing right now in Cambodia, that it is estimated between 1/5 and 1/3 of the country's people directly benefited from assistance of the foreign aid groups, which inject $1 billion annually into the country economy. But we are not really seeing the effect at all, right?
That's right. And according to Holton also, he's actually a very environmentally friendly person. Even his factory, which is located on the outskirts of Siem Reap, he employs about 350 people who are mainly women, churning out 50 million products annually, mostly microfiber cloth and pouches for designer brand sunglasses. And the most interesting part is, if you visit his factory, it will not be like the typical factory that you always hear about a lot of human rights violation. He actually has a daycare room, which includes specific places for breastfeeding mothers who also get 4 months of paid maternity leave. How is that for human rights?
4 months is actually 1 month more than Malaysia. We only get 3 months.
And Halton is doing this almost single-handedly, trying to show everyone that it's possible if you want to make a change. You don't always have to wait for the government or some NGO to really fight for it. And the company also subsidizes a daily nutritious lunch, pays for health and accident insurance, which is a rarity in the sector.
Wow.
And of course, we know it's a very, very rare occurrence.
Yeah, I mean, I think all this small investment like paying for insurance, providing lunch, and also providing area for women, especially especially mothers, to breastfeed their younglings. These are really small investments if you look at it.
Yeah.
But it would help a lot in improving the working sector there.
Right, and I think based on so many factories that has been reported, that's been in the news recently, I really hope that they can take a couple of pointers from this, especially when Halton said, when your workers are happy, you make happy good products.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
eventually that increases the productivity of the employees as well, as
Definitely.
opposed to overworking them all the time.
And we move on to the arts and culture side of Southeast Asia. Malaysia lays down the law on fat cops. Okay, this sounds really bad to use the word fat.
That, well, you can blame our IGP for that. Well, he is the one who came out yesterday to say that about 11,000 of the country's
Wait, 11,000?
11,000, that's right.
Wow.
Of our country's police officers are actually obese.
Obese?
And you can blame
How can you be a police officer when you're obese? And this is not like fat. This is not like, you gain a bit of weight. This is like obese.
It is. I think that's a very good question, because he said that if you guys remain obese, you will not get promoted. You will not get any important position. But if they were on the fat side or obese side, they should not even be hired as police officers in the first place.
That's true. I mean, how can we rely on these people to run and catch the thief?
Yeah, that's true. But well, you can blame that on the Malaysian food, which has also made Malaysia the fattest country in Southeast Asia.
I'm not surprised. And what we are seeing right now is that National Police Chief Khalid Abdul Bakar said that officers will now have to pass a fitness test before they can rise up to the ranks. Well, they do definitely. And a new fitness program has been introduced for overweight cops. You know who would actually be the best person to head the fitness program?
Him.
No, Khairi Jamaluddin.
That's true. We do have Fit Malaysia. This cop should go for Fit Malaysia.
He should expand his Fit Malaysia program
into the police force.
Yeah.
And well, of course, they also said that this obesity can limit their effectiveness in terms of crime fighters, like what you mentioned earlier, or how they're gonna run after the thieves and whatnot. But it can also cause diabetes and high blood pressure, which is what our police chief is mainly concerned about at the moment. And he also said that they need to be aware that they need to constantly exercise and stay fit if they want to remain police officers.
Yeah, if they want to remain in any job that requires running. So before we end the show, I want to go on the last news of today, which is more support for Singapore athletes to pursue career development.
And current and former national athletes seeking more support for career development have more options open to them right now after 9 new companies officially joined the Singapore Sports Institute's Specs Business Network on Wednesday. And these 9 companies on board are Adidas, Agape, Fucon, Fox International, HP, Hyflux, Antuk, PSB, and SAS Institute.
It sends a very clear message that the corporate Singapore is beginning to understand what supporting Team Singapore means, and that they believe in the DNA of excellence in their athletes. This is according to Miss Peggy Tink, Deputy Director of Athlete Services and Recruitment and Development at SSI.
I think this is a good effort because when you think about being an athlete, they're constantly training all the time, and when they're not in training, they don't really have much to do. And in this way, where they have a career development sort of hub that they can go, and then they get flexible hours, they get internships, they get apprenticeships. So it's good for them to build up all these skills and experience. So the moment they stop being in sports, they immediately have something to fall back on.
That's true, and I think supporting Singapore's athlete is very important. Not just Singapore, I think the whole of Southeast
National athletes. Yeah.
The whole of Southeast Asia, we should focus on developing and sustaining and taking care of our athletes. And because, I mean, they might only be able to contribute in terms of, winning medals in their prime age, which is younger than 30 years old or younger than 40. But after that, I think they would definitely provide a good I would say expertise to either being a coach or doing something that would add more value in the sports industry.
Definitely, and it equips them for the future as well.
Yeah. Okay, that's all from our show today, and thanks for listening.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Yeah, and don't forget to have a great day today.